Hello everyone, I'm Jim Paul. Today I want to explain the anatomy of the nasal cavity. Focus on the bones, muscles, blood supply, innervation, and articulation, respectively. First, let's talk about the bones from the nasal cavity. The nasal cavity is supported by several bones of the skull. The most important are the nasal bones. You can see it right there. The maxillar, the ethmoid bone, and the sphenoid bone. The palatine are going to and the vomer. The ethmoid bone plays a very important role because it forms part of the roof of the nasal cavity and contributes to the nasal septum. Through is like a perpendicular plate. The vomer, together with the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid at the septal cartilage, forms the nasal septum, which divides the nasal cavity into the right and left halves. Right there. Inside the nasal cavity, we find the nasal concave and also turbinates the superior and middle concave are parts of the ethmoid bone, while the inferior nasal conch is an independent bone. This structure increases the surface area of the nasal cavity and helps one humidify and filter the air during the breathing. Now I want to explain the muscles associated with the nose. The main muscles include the nasal muscle, which comprises of the like nostrils, the alveolar superiors and alicoinaceae, which elevate the upper lip and the nasal island, the depressor septinaceae, which pull the nasal septum downward, kinda. These muscles belong the muscles of the facial expression and are innervated by the facial nerve and the cranial nerve 7, which lie like there, upper, middle, and lower run. The nasal cavity has a very rich blood supply coming from the branch of the blood internal carotid artery and the external carotid artery. One of the most important arteries in the is the metaphalatigon artery, because it's like a branch of the maxillary artery and supplies most of the posterior nasal cavity. The anterior and posterior ethmoid arteries branch for the ophthalmic artery and supply the superior part of the nasal cavity. I will talk about the innervation of the nasal cavity. The sensory innervation mainly comes from the trigeminal nerve, cranial nerve 5. The ophthalmic division B1 provides the anterior ethmoidal nerve, which supplies the anterior superior region of the nasal cavity, like there. The maxillary division B2 provides the sensory innervation of the posterior region, tongue, branch such as nasopalatine nerve and the posterior nasal nerve. Additionally, the olfactory nerve, cranial nerve number 1, is responsible for the sense of the smell and innervates the superior part of the nasal cavity. Finally, regarding articulation, the nasal bones articulate superior with the frontal bone, laterally with the maxilla, and medially with each other of the midline. This articulation from the bony framework of the external nose and support all the nasal cavity. In conclusion, the nasal cavity is a complex anatomical structure composed of bone, muscles, blood vessels, and nerves that work together to perform essential functions such as breathing, air filtration, humidification, and olfaction.